You are in the C-Space studio. I am James Kotecki, and I'm here with Brad Smallwood. He's the Vice President of Marketing Science at Facebook. Marketing Science, what's that all about?
So, you can think about marketing as like putting messages in front of people, but increasingly with the increased data that people have, you can use that data to figure out what's working and what's not. So simple examples of like, well, how valuable is an impression versus the click that's created from it, or how important is video relative to other formats and stuff. And so figuring out how to buy marketing more effectively and using data in order to do that. That's what my team does.
What are you thinking about? What are you thinking about these days? What's top of mind for you as we enter 2017 and the data and analytics front?
Oh God, well, I mean, you think about clicks. Clicks are this clicks and cookies. Like that, I would say, it's what I'm thinking about the most. Probably not the most innovative thing, but it's what I'm thinking about. The reason is that so many marketers are relying on cookies and clicks as their measure of success. And my team's job and our job is to help them understand how to think beyond that. Like when you think about television or other forms of media, you don't measure, you don't use an interaction with an ad to say whether it worked or not. You're actually looking at, did I drive sales? Did I not drive sales? And so that's kind of, it's kind of getting marketers to really think in that way. That's definitely the top of mind thing for me.
It seems like data being the thing has been the thing for several years now, right? I mean, if we've come to conferences like this, we've had conversations like this many times. Are marketers starting to get it? Like, where are we in the process of marketers understanding and kind of unlocking the secret here?
Yeah, I mean, like you've heard the term data-driven marketing for, as you say, 8-10 years. I would say you could probably go back 20 or 30 years. Marketers get it. Marketers understand that they need to use data. It's hard. It's different than the way they've done it in the past. You think about how most media today is still bought. It's bought based on gross rating points or GRPs and some general idea of planning across TV. But the capabilities that digital gives you is I can actually understand exactly the people that saw the ad, exactly the reach and frequency with which my marketing is running, and then I can actually tie it back to outcomes, whether those outcomes be online transactions or offline transactions even in store. But that's not how they bought, and so it's training that new muscle for marketers, and I think we're really getting there. If you see what some of the great marketers in the world are doing, they're very focused on this, and then a lot of these kind of not upstarts but kind of newer marketers are kind of leading the path, whether it be like a Netflix or an Airbnb. They're really kind of leading the path in terms of how to use this data to become better marketers.
You mentioned a few names. I mean, if you can you walk me through an example of somebody who's really getting it right? Yeah,
I mean, and it depends on the industry, but I'll take let's say a Netflix, for example. They use their data. They use the data that they understand about consumers to say what's the right creative to put in front of somebody, and they're using data to do that. And then they look and they say, oh, as I engage that person, how do I bring them back to Netflix to re-engage with me? How do I get them to sign up? How do I get them to investigate more shows and keep them more engaged with my brand? And they're using data all along that funnel, not just to build their brand, but to build their brand, drive acquisition, drive re-engagement, and ultimately kind of long-term longevity. And they think about data across that whole thing. And then the other thing the other piece that companies like Netflix, and they're not the only one, there's lots of them, they're not looking at just whether something happened when somebody saw the ad, but did the ad actually drive that result? Is there a causal, I see the ad and a causal difference that the marketing changed their behavior as a result of? That's what kind of the great marketers are doing.
I know that Netflix even specifically actually used its data to figure out what kind of content to create for its audience, what kind of shows to greenlight.
Exactly. Yeah. And that you see that, using the data for insights, and it's not just Netflix. You look at some of the largest CPGs in the world, or FMCGs, depending on if you're in Europe or not. But and what they're doing is that they're using the insights that they get, whether it be through social listening platforms or actively kind of querying people online and saying, well, how should we be tweaking our products and how should we be marketing those products? So not just changing the products and designing it around the insights, but also how do we talk to people about those products? And even I think some of the stuff that Boz just talked about on stage about like how Sony Pictures is looking at tuning their creative around who's going to end up seeing that creative instead of just one trailer fits all. So,
one of the themes here in the content studio has been, the relationship between creativity and data and analytics. I mean, so you're definitely a hardcore, rah-rah data numbers guy, right? But like, where do you see creativity fitting in? Is creativity as necessary anymore, or is it a different kind of creativity that's necessary in this new environment?
I mean, creative, I would, I know it sounds, well, maybe crazy from an analytics person, but also it sounds obvious, but creative is probably more important than ever. And the reason for that is that consumers have choice in every media that they choose to watch. If you go back 50 years, people were forced to watch commercials during a few networks ad breaks, and all the ad breaks happened at the same time, so you were going to be watching commercials. Well, now there are hundreds of channels, some with commercials, some without, or there's Facebook, where you have a feed environment where people can, if they don't like what they're seeing, they'll move on to the next story. And that choice means that it's the creative's responsibility, and that's why it's so important, is to grab that attention, get that brand message across super quickly, get them engaged, or drive the value really quickly. But like, the creative needs to be the thing that does that. It is a different model, but it's still very, very important. And how they think about it, it's not just about storytelling, it's about thinking about different steps in the process. Grabbing that attention and getting that quick message across, getting people to then kind of hopefully engage deeper with the brand, and then ultimately maybe taking in that entire story. But there's 3 steps along the process, and creative needs to think about each of those steps.
As you mentioned, Andrew Bosworth, Boz, we actually had him in the studio as well earlier. Talking about the ways that Facebook itself is influenced by the data around the ways that people use it. From your perspective, what are you seeing there in the ways that your users are engaging with what you have?
I mean, just in terms of how they're engaging with the platform, like on the marketing side of things and on the measurement side of things, we kind of I'll go back to this concept of choice. Like we see that consumers are getting through experiences very, very quickly. If I'm consuming my feed, I will go through and I'll see particular friends. Sorry if you're one of them. I may skip. I'll see. Oh, I'm not interested in that. I'm going to move on to the next story. But that person still popped to top of my mind. I took in a short message from that person, and then I moved on to the next story. That is kind of how people are consuming it. And then every so often I go, I'm going to go deep. I'm going to go watch a full video. I'm going to do this. But I'm trying to take in information very quickly, and then I'll either continue to use use the environment, or I may turn it off and stuff. And that is a change because media consumption is happening quickly and with choice.
And that's interesting that you mentioned having it tied to people. We also had Sarah Personette from Facebook in here talking about how everything is about people for Facebook. And I wonder, do you have information about how people relate specific Facebook articles or whatever content that's posted on Facebook to the person that's actually posting? I mean, I can imagine a situation where the same article is posted by 2 of my different friends, and maybe I read it in one case and I don't read it in another.
Right. Well, it's that classic influencer model, right? There are people that you really pay attention to, and so well, instead of thinking about one friend versus another, if I see a story, and the story is kind of there, but then one of my best friends actually posts the story, I'm more likely to engage. It's like, if this person thought it was relevant enough for me to pay attention, then I should pay attention for a couple reasons. One, I'm kind of like them and I'm interested in what they're saying, and the other is when I interact with them directly, I want to be knowledgeable enough about what they're going through, and that's that very much is the kind of that influencer model. We see the same kind of is true for ads, right? Where the kind of that natural social endorsement, as people like brands and everything, you're naturally kind of socially endorsing brands or stories or stuff like that, and that is kind of very much in the offline world. That's the equivalent of people having a conversation, or wearing a particular pair of shoes or whatever. That's the digital kind of equivalent of that.
Do you have any other findings or thoughts about your data that may be counterintuitive to marketers, but that are increasingly important as we enter this bold new future that we're all building here?
Yeah, I mean, so I mentioned the one, again, Boz, I brought this up on stage, but but the idea of this short consumption and thinking about that not as oh, somebody skipped and didn't pay attention, thinking of that as I'm going to get a message across quickly. And you can get messages across very quickly. That is counterintuitive how quickly people can take in messages. Lots of research studies going back 40, 50 years about it takes people about 0.25 seconds in order to take in an image and information. And so thinking about that as an opportunity, how quickly people scroll through, not just, not through the feed in general. I'm not talking about ads, I'm talking about that. The other is that people, there is a very different kind of scrolling behavior based on demographics and who people are. I would say, you look at, my generation and older generations where people scroll slower than like my kids who are 17 years old, they scroll much, much quicker. And you kind of like, those opportunities, there's not like one, it takes this amount of time in general to get a message across. Yes, there's a baseline of 0.25 seconds, but after that, it does vary a little bit based on the demographics.
So you can see that slope. Is it basically with every coming demographic, the younger you get, the shorter your attention span? Is it that simple?
Yeah, it's not that simple. It's different. It's different based on different groups, but there is generally a behavior that individuals have in terms of their standard scrolling speed. And then what we look for is variances in that, meaning that stories were interesting. So if I'm scrolling at a certain level and then I vary and get much slower, then we know, oh, well, that there was something that captured that person's attention. That was probably something that we want to highlight that, because that may be something that can inform the next time we serve a story or an ad or whatever.
Are marketers in general making the most use of all the data that Facebook actually has to offer about this kind of stuff? You mentioned scroll speed, for example.
Yeah. No, I would say marketers in general, we could go into scroll speed and all that kind of stuff, and honestly, we don't provide that at an individual level. There is so much basic data that people aren't using yet. Going back to one of your earlier questions around, what is the thing that I would like people to do, and it's using data more, and that scroll speed. Everybody likes those really sophisticated ones, but there's some basic things like the idea of when you're thinking about planning and buying, use the data to plan and buy based on people, not based on media channels. That's a basic. Thinking about reach and frequency, and thinking about how to get messages across quickly, that kind of data, we think that's the higher order. Yes, there are tons of metrics out there, but they aren't necessarily the ones that are going to be, I wouldn't put at the top of the list in order to improve your marketing.
So we're almost in this weird area now where the levels of sophistication for marketers vis-a-vis digital and Facebook and these other platforms is very widely ranging, and a lot of people, you're saying, just need to focus more on the fundamentals. Yeah,
the fundamentals, that's where there's so much opportunity that lies there. I'll give a quick stat. If you were to look at the Facebook auction, and you were to score people based on how clicky they are, and then take just how clicky, not on a particular ad. Most people, they take the bottom 50% of people, and let's say they cost 1x. The people that click the most on ads, they're not the most influenced by advertising, they just click more. They cost on average 5 times as much in our auction as the bottom 50% of people. All sorts of research, everybody's equally influenced by advertising. Those other people just click more, but because people are so focused on clicks, the auction, the supply and demand dynamics bid those up. It's an opportunity for marketers, as they use data, to understand how value is getting created by all of those people and not just by those clicks, if that makes sense.
It does, and we have about 60 seconds left, and we actually are on Facebook Live right now. Great. So it would probably behoove me to ask you really quickly, any data thoughts around Facebook Live?
Oh, well, I mean, it is kind of the new platform. I shouldn't say the new platform, but it is this great new kind of video opportunity. Where photos were, probably 3-4 years ago. That's where we see video in general, but live is kind of the natural extension of that. So, huge opportunity for us. It's still nascent to some degree, but it is growing rapidly.
Well, we know you'll be crunching the numbers on that as it grows. Brad Smallwood is the Vice President of Marketing Science at Facebook. Thanks for joining us in the C-Space studio.
Great, thank you very much.
And I'm James Kotek. You keep it locked right here for more great C-Space studio content.